Hey guys, this is just a quick tutorial on creating an FK-IK switch in Maya. So, generally speaking, when you create an FK-IK switch for a specific joint chain, you generally have your original deformation joints sort of constrained between your IK and your FK joint chain. There's a number of ways of doing that. So one of the more easier ways would be to use constraints, but that makes your outliner pretty messy, and it's hard to keep track of all the different constraints for every joint that you're going to be constraining to your FK or IK joint chains. You can probably do something similar with the connection editor, and then use set-driven keys to turn things off and on. But in our case, we're going to try and use the node editor to basically create a link between our original deformation joints and our control joints. Now, to do that, I'm just going to show you with a more visual representation of what's going on. So normally when you are rigging a character, you would have your IK and your FK joints sort of overlapping your original deformation joints. But for this demonstration, I'm going to show you how it actually works in a visual sense. So you'll actually see when I use the switch, and once we've done with this little setup, you'll actually see the hand or the arm move up and down between our FK and IK joints as we switch things on and off. So let's begin. So what we need to do is select our three joints that represent our arm. So our shoulder or our bicep, our forearm, and our wrist. So we're going to do that for every version of our joint chain. So we're going to include our IK joints. So let's have a look. There's our IK. There it is. We're going to select our IK joints and our FK joints as well. So basically what we need to do is create a relationship between our IK and our FK joints, wherein our deformation joints kind of fit in between those two. So, word of warning, when you start using the node editor for creating FK-IK switches, it does add a lot of new nodes automatically, and it does start to look a bit messy. Things start moving automatically as well. So the best thing you can do is pin your nodes as they get created. That way that when we do create new nodes, the original sort of layout won't start automatically going haywire. So there's not much to it when it comes to creating our FK-IK switches. We're only going to be using one kind of new node called a color blend node. That basically is a way in which to blend two different values or even two different colors equally or unequally depending on how you use the slider. So let's create that now. Let's create a blend color node. And we're going to create 3 of those for now. See how they start getting created all over the place? Let's just pin them so they no longer move around. To pin them, click P on your keyboard. Alright, so let's get started by constraining or linking the translations of our joint chains together. So to do that, let's just expand our blend color nodes to show what's going on. So if you look in the channel box, there's a few values to play with. One is the blender attribute. That's basically giving us our ratio between the influence of one node to the other. So right now it's at 0.5. So you'll notice that when I start linking things up, nothing's really going to happen because it's averaging between the two distances. The next thing we have to think about is these two values here, the color values. So that's where we're going to plug in our translation values into here. And you'll see that when we create a link between our translation values and these color values, that it will have to convert that data in a way in which it uses a calculation node, basically, to convert it to a value that this node understands. With translation, it's not too complicated, but when it comes to rotation, it will get more complicated and it will use those nodes. So let's start with the translation. So pretty simply, let's just expand our FK and IK nodes so we can see our translates. You'll find that sometimes the nodes behave in a way that they don't show everything even though you expand them in the same way. So just expand them fully. Alright, so simple matter, just click on the translate node output and plug it into the color 1 input. Now you want to be consistent with this in that if you're going to use color 1 for your FK for one joint, you want to keep it the same for all the other joints too. So you want to make sure that the translate node goes into the color 1 node, and the IK translate goes into color 2. It can be either way, but as long as you're consistent, that's what matters. So be consistent. Alright, so with that done, we have to plug the output into our translations for bicep 2, our original deformation joints. So we'll click on output and go to translate. Output into translate. Output into translate. So we're basically matching. We're matching the output for our bicep joints to our deformation bicep joints. So with that in mind, let's quickly rename our blend color nodes. So we're going to call this trans blend bicep. I'm going to call this one trans blend forearm, and then this one I'm going to call it trans blend wrist. Now you'll see that these values have all been linked up, and we have a blend value of 0.5. So if I click on this wrist node and I play with this value, it should blend between our joints. So yeah, in this case I'm using the bicep. So as I'm increasing the influence from our IK to our FK, the joint is moving up to the FK joint chain. If I bring it back down to 0, it's heading towards the IK joint chain. Now if I put that to 0.5, it's going to sit in the middle, just as you expect. Alright, so that's that for the translations. Now what about our rotations? So the rotations is practically identical, except it's going to add a few new calculations. So let's make another set of blend nodes, blend color nodes. We'll duplicate that 2 more times, and let's rename these before we get started as well, just so we don't confuse ourselves. We'll go rot blend bicep. Rot blend forearm. Rot blend wrist. Cool. Now, this is where we need to pin our nodes. You'll see why in a second. So, same thing. Same problem with consistency as well. So if you have your FK bicep joint going to color 1, you're going to make sure that the FK bicep joint rotation is going to color 1 in the other nodes as well. This is important when we start working on our switches, because we're going to be using a single switch with a single value influencing these nodes. So if we end up putting, say, FK bicep 1, or the FK joints with their translations to color 1, and then the rotations to color 2, we're going to get some conflicting math, basically. So you want to make sure that's all consistent. So again, let's expand this. And make sure that when we plug in our rotations to this our blend nodes, that we're plugging it into the same pattern as our translations. So rotate from our FK to color 1. So let's do that again. And you'll see it creates this unit conversion node in place in between our rotation and our color node. It's doing that because it's actually got a lot more information that it needs to sort of interpret in order to pump into the color node. So it will create that for every time we add a new node. So you'll see how they just get placed in random places. Very annoying, but pinning them will keep them from going everywhere. If we add new ones, basically. So rotate to rotate. I'm just going to quickly do that now. Rotate to rotate. And then there we go. And then we have all these other unit conversion nodes to deal with as well. So just going to place them on the side there, because I'm going to place them on next to my inputs, because it's going to create 4 more unit conversions as we output these to our deform joints. So with that in mind, let's add these outputs to our rotations. So we go to output, bicep, rotation. Output, forearm, rotation. Output, deformation, wrist, rotation. And it's created these unit conversions for our nodes. And I'm just going to put them sort of on the output side, just so I know that they are part of the outputs. Now, if I go to my joints, you'll see that nothing doesn't look very different. But when I start rotating my FK joint, you'll see that because the blend node is sitting at 0.5, it's taking on half the amount of rotation as the FK rotation. So now it's just a matter of creating the switch so that it inherits 100% of that rotation. And again, if I translate my joints, it's taking in half the rotation and half the translation. Half the translation. See? So now we just need to create a switch that allows this joint chain to 100% copy the translation and rotational values of our IK or FK joints. Now, a lot of people like to create a little sort of control NURBS thing that is sort of parented to the wrist of our deformation. I personally don't like that because it's just adding extra clutter to the rig itself. Some people prefer that. You might prefer that. So I just look up some alternate videos about doing that process. Personally, I just like to keep it clean. I put all my switches onto my global my center of gravity control or my root control. not the global control, the one that controls. Just imagine this control is controlling the upper body of our character. So, with that in mind, I'm going to select this control and add a new attribute. I'm going to quickly rename this as a FK IK switch example. Alright, so we're going to add a new channel that allows us to switch things off and on. To do that, we'll go to our add attribute button. We're going to say FK to IK to IK. I'm going to give this a nice name of FK to IK without any spaces. I'm going to give our data type a float, a minimum of 0 and a maximum of 1. Alright, I'm going to push add, and you'll see that it adds a new channel for input into our channel box. Now, what we need to do is feed in this value into our shape, our color blend nodes. To do that, we'll select our control, we'll bring it into our node editor, and we're going to use the group node, expand that, and we should see our input there. Here it is. Now, all we need to do is feed in our FK to IK output into each of our blend nodes, basically. There's a few ways we can do this. We can do it manually by just simply linking up our FK to IK node into its blend, and or we can use the channel box. But in this case, let's just use, not the channel box, the connection editor. So to do that, we can select go to Windows, go to General Editors, Connection Editor. We have because I selected my FK IK switch example, it has it already there. I'll change that to show keyable only. So I have my FK IK switch there. Now on my right side, I'm going to select our blend nodes. I'm going to reload the right side, and you'll see that I want to link my FK IK to this blender input. So we can do it all at once without having to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, or whatever, how many that you need. We're just going to go select the FK IK, select blender, 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 and blender. And as you can see, it's creating those connections automatically. Now, look what's happened. Our FK, our deform joint has automatically already switched down to our IK joint. So if I select my control and go to 1, you'll see it's going to my FK. But as you can see, I've kind of named my attribute the wrong way, because of the way that I've ordered my colors, basically. So instead of saying FK to IK, I should say IK to FK, and we can do that relatively easily simply by going to Edit, Edit Attribute. We'll select our attribute and we'll switch that from FK to IK, and vice versa. Just so it's nice and clear for the animator to understand. And push close. So now we know exactly when 0 is when the control set to 0, we're at IK mode. When we're set to 1, we're at FK. FK, IK. FK, IK. And that's all we need to do to make an FK IK switch. Now obviously again, you'd have these controls set at the same level of FK-IK switch, or the same level as our deform bones. But that's basically it when it comes to creating an FK-IK switch. So yeah, that's all we need to do for this for this setup. Feel free to experiment, play with the different settings, how to create your FK-IK controls to begin with, and then test it out with a FK-IK switch. Okay, thanks.